Good morning. Morning. I thought today I would actually, how many of you have actually taken the time to look at the folder and work on let me see if I can get it. It's right here. The actual Independence Camp equity environments that is willing to take the time to share. If you didn't do it, it's fine. We can still do it together. So let me get just an idea. Do you want to do it together? Show me hands at least. Yes?
Yeah, I did a little bit of reflection,
Okay, good.
but
Thank you.
nothing very formal. Um,
Very informal.
would you like?
So let's hear your reflections and I'm going to stop the share.
Okay. Um, Hi, I'm Lila. Um, I work in a preschool called Oak Grove School in Ojai, California. And I'm on break right now, so I'm not in the actual space that I was thinking about. Um, but this past year, we had a child with some physical challenges. And so throughout the year, we were really thinking about how accessible is the playground, how accessible is the classroom, sort of like this child has a sort of a condition that is likely to deteriorate as she grows. And so at the moment, she's mostly able to access the whole playground, but there are some spaces that are exclusive to her, such as the climbing dome, or there's a tree that kids climb in the yard too. And those things she's not able to do. And there are other children who are also unable to access those places. But it feels sort of it feels different to me, sort of knowing that this child may not be able to ever access those spaces rather than a child who maybe in a year or two will develop those skills and be able to do that. So just reflecting on why does that feel so that it does feel really different and how to sort of work with that. And we added some more railings and things in the yard in the past year. But I've just been thinking about those kinds of things and thinking about getting more um, books that might help her and the other children sort of have a window into experiences such as sort of having different physical abilities and yeah, that kind of
And so that's a profound reflection, especially thinking about what makes it different.
thing.
So let's hear from everybody else. What do you think about what has made it different? And Jesse, you know you can step in anytime. What makes it so much harder when we know we have a child that that may not move forward, and developmentally their clock may always remain the same or even slow down further? I mean, I work with many children with diverse abilities, and I know that there may be a sense of hopelessness that comes in for us when we see this. So, what's your thought? What do you think? I have a few ideas, but I want to hear from you too. Anne.
Um, I guess it's hard because we're trained and our focus is on how to move children forward. So it's a whole nother shift. But I'm just thinking of Jesse's story of inviting everybody under the table when that one student was always kind of hiding under the table. So I guess maybe it would be more helpful as her abilities start to regress or start to change, how can maybe there's more places that are inaccessible to her, but how can you find places for her while inviting the other kids to those places? I don't know if you heard this story, Layla, but that I don't want to take. There was one little boy who was having a little trouble integrating with the classroom, so he would be under the table. So then Jesse's response was to invite other people under the table instead of the painting under the table. So maybe that would be the way to make it feel more positive rather than, oh no, more places she can't go. Mm-hmm. Oh, yay, here's the new places for everybody.
One of the things I learned from Bev Boss, and many of you don't even probably know who she was. Some of you may remember her, but she always said, it's not about tomorrow. It's not about getting them ready. It is about creating the memories of today that will support them and sustain them for the rest of their lives. And I think when it comes to the issues of equity, we spend way too much time thinking about, well, they can't do this, they can't do that, they're not capable of this, they're not capable of that, instead of really focusing on what can they do today and really spend our time thinking about that. And I think that's the beginnings of really talking about equity. How do we remain present for the one moment that the child is there? How do we look at our environments from the beginning, not as how can we make them adaptable or how can we adapt them, but really more about how do we make them become the spaces that every single child that steps in will succeed in that space. And I think those are the really important moments that we need to continue to think about. Any other reflection, any other thought? I didn't expect this topic to be so silent. Let's talk about that. Why is this one of the hardest talks and topics to have conversations about? Why is it so hard for us to address the concept of equity? And maybe we need to begin by just defining what that means. What is equity for every one of you?
Can I, Miriam, I know I missed the very beginning part of it, but one of my experiences or a consistent theme I feel like I experience around equity with teachers in the classroom is that if they make adjustments for a child, they think it's unequitable for the other children. So if I make this accommodation for, let's say, a chair to be at circle time, often the response I hear is, well, everybody's going to want to be in a chair. Mm-hmm. And I say, so why is that an issue? First, if everybody wants to sit in a chair, can we find a way to make that no into a yes? But also that most children, when they might want to try out what another child might need, find that they don't need it and they move forward to their level of need. And so that issue of equity becoming something that makes it unequitable for other children dissipates very quickly. But helping teachers move past that. It's like, Jesse, I watched the video the other week and it was funny. I was thinking about the table and I had a slightly different experience where the older infants to young toddlers kept wanting to walk on the table. And the teacher's like, we don't know what to do. What are we going to do? And I said, why can't you just turn the table over? And they were like, wait, what? We can do that? And I said, yes. Why can't you do it? We have to sanitize it one way or the other. So when you flip it back upright, we can sanitize it. And they just every afternoon, they flipped the table over after snack time. And then it became an activity area in and of itself. And they would all go and dance on it and have a great time. And then slowly through time, it just became the table got flipped and they didn't care anymore. It wasn't a need to do that. And it's like, again, how do we make that no into a yes, but help the teachers from my experience coming from an administrative standpoint, that changing things and meeting a child's individual needs doesn't mean it's unequitable for other children.
I think if I can just step back a little bit, I think it's our understanding of equity that plays a big role. So, my friend Michelle Grant always talks about equity this way. So, if you look at your hands, put them together like this. Equity means everybody gets the same thing. That's equality. That's not equity. What happens with equality, yes, everybody gets the same thing, but you move up, but the gap is never bridged. So equity really means we look at specifics of every child that comes into the classroom, we support them, and that's when equity begins to narrow the gap. So what you're talking about with the chairs, that child may need that chair because whatever is going on in their lives, they need that chair to sit. You know, we have children that have low tone in their bodies that they may need that. They are hypersensitive. I mean, there's so many different variables that when we support them, we can create that equity. But beginning very, very early on to have those conversations, it's important. Really begin by defining what is equity truly about and how do we feel about it? Because equity applies in many different ways, but our understanding of equity may not be clear enough, or it requires also a lot of courage, to be honest with you. I mean, that's probably the elephant on the table or in the room as I started asking questions for people to start talking about. Equity is hard. It's a difficult conversation to have. So let me hear from others. Jesse, you can pitch in anytime, take over.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the equality comment because that's the first thing that came into my brain. Because it's something, having worked in administration too, Sarah, it was conversations I had to have with staff of like, well, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And when you get met with some of those, well, no, every child's going to need it. It's, well, what we're doing isn't equality. What we're trying to do is be equitable. So having them define like what is fair too, because if they equate fairness with equality, then that's a deeper issue that we have to dive into before they can ever even start to understand how to build an equitable classroom, right? Like, I'm
True,
looking forward to prep week.
true.
Let's just do it in the beginning so we can set the tone for the year.
I think it's essential to start in the beginning.
Annie,
Yeah.
What do you think?
So I was just thinking that it's also so important to be having those conversations with the children as well. I often like use this phrase in my classroom that we all have different needs, right? And I think that's something that children as young as 2 and 3 can start to, be building an understanding of that. And I'll give them an example. I'll say, when we sit down for our meeting, it really helps so and so to have something that they can a fidget or something that they can do with their hands, but somebody else might need something different. And I'll give them a concrete example. And I've noticed that the children will even like they'll use that phrase and they'll say like I need this, like this helps me, this helps my body feel calm. And they understand they really are like building that conceptual understanding of like what is it that I need to be successful as opposed to what somebody else needs to be successful. And it's not the same for everyone.
That's why I like the agreements too,
Mhm.
because it takes that into account when you like build them with the children, because they all have these different perspectives of what they deem as fair and what they deem as equitable. So getting those perspectives and getting them to share their ideas and to see that, it really strengthens it, right? Like I feel like agreements tie in really well with equity.
I
Mhm.
think too, like it goes back to what does belonging look like in our environments, and how do we reflect back that a child is like seen and valued and heard no matter who they are, and maybe not even just a child, like maybe our teachers too and the families too. And like if you're thinking about like if you want to think about the theme, right, of an ecosystem, everything touches everything. And so thinking about how to not work in like a silo, which we're also used to doing, right? It's like so easy to just like stay in our own lane, but our desire is to be connecting with one another. And so, Layla, I haven't met you before. Hi, my name is Jessie. I just think about how to engage like um that child, Layla, or maybe their parents, or like observations through teaching and like their abilities are so worth celebrating, right? And so, like, instead of thinking what they can't do, like moving away from the ableism and like always moving towards like, what can we support them? And just like you were saying, and how can we engage everyone to include them? And like, what does teaching inclusivity look like? And kids are, I mean, I think we all believe this. Like, kids are funny, right? They already know how. Like, they're so creative and they really want to know their peers. And maybe they're curious and have hard questions, but instead of being afraid of them, like, just like embracing them, Annie, just like you were saying, with love and like grace and like see what it can teach us too. So, I just think about not even like a child with different abilities, but somebody who's brand new, right? And like not even brand new. In my case, like I'm working in a space where brand new might mean brand new to the country or like brand new to school ever. And
Mhm.
brand new to resources that they didn't even know existed. And thinking about how to reflect back equity to them means I have to know who they are. And like really leaning into finding out who those folks are that I'm working with.
Mhm.
You bring up a good point too with the families piece. Because that's something as like teachers that we can help facilitate if we're thoughtful and we try. Because I know, so my sister has stiff person syndrome. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with it. It's an autoimmune disorder or disease, and it manifests differently in each person, right? Autoimmune tend to do that. But for her, it attacked her spinal cord. It's what Celine Dion has. You kind of can turn into a human statue. So for a period of time, my nephew, they were one of them was in preschool, and she actually had to go into the hospital. She wasn't able to function, and she had to spend some time there. And when she came out, there happened to be like a family event, and she was having to use like a walker wheelchair. And the teachers were really great about talking with the children about it ahead of time and then trying to normalize this because they'd seen my sister before, right? So there's like this shift, and trying to make sure that her child still felt like his mom was included in the family event. And I'll always be grateful to them because she came back so happy and felt like she really made connections too and felt supported. And she was really nervous to go into this space. So it spoke volumes about the level of care that they put into like the family as a whole.
Yeah. I'm just going back to the comment in the beginning that was, well, how is it fair for everybody else? Imagine if you think that way for the families that come into your program and you say, well, it's not fair to all the children that we're making these accommodations for Jessie's sister as she's coming back. So imagine if we kept thinking that way, and I want to touch back a little bit on the issue of fairness and our conception of fairness. And even the way children may perceive fairness, usually fairness is seen as it's not fair that I don't get to go to the movies with everybody else. So that means I'm left out. But if I get to go, then it's already fair that somebody else doesn't get to go. So it's a very personal perspective. And that's how children actually perceive, but it's not fair. So we can move away from the conversation of fairness by itself and really talk about, yeah, sometimes it feels like it's not fair. However, let's talk about what is equity and begin to bring it back to the idea that not everybody's going to get the same thing. They may need different things. I also want to go back a little bit to the concept of the fidgets. I tend to add fidgets all over the space. To me, they're part of loose parts because that way you don't have to have one particular fidget for the child that needs the fidget, but they're sitting, at group gatherings. It is not about the fidget itself. It is about the interactions and also about how we set up our norms and our agreements. If we understand that every child may have a different need to use a fidget, a different need to use a chair when they're sitting, or different types of chairs, then we're beginning to plan from the beginning. And that makes us creating those equitable spaces. When we think about every child that may come to the space and meet that before they come in, then we have less need to start doing accommodations at the last minute, rushing to accommodate. So I really encourage you to step back and really take the time to look at your current environment, especially if you're coming back in August or September. What is there that it's already excluding? And can we go back and take a different lens? And I think I gave you 4 ideas on how to do that when they're coming into the spaces. Jesse, I'm just keep looking at you, and I think that Diego is at the window, isn't he?
So, for context, everyone, my desk is out to my backyard, and yes, my child is coming up to the window. He's engaged in some water play outside, and he's randomly coming up and trying to hold up things that he's made. And I've been trying to stay present in here.
You are present, but you also have the right to be looking at a child that is calling for your attention. I hope you all do that. So anyway, sorry, I just couldn't stop looking at you, and I knew what was going on. So anybody else, any concepts or thoughts
Well,
about?
Miriam, I appreciate what you said about getting ahead of it. And the new school year is perfect because I think another reason that it is hard for us sometimes is because finding that place of equity sometimes is messy, right? So if we go back to the one child wants to bring a chair. So then if we say, okay, if you want to bring a chair as well, you can. So for a few days, maybe everybody's going to bring a chair. And then all of a sudden, circle time takes a lot longer and it's loud and everybody's dragging chairs. And then, but as Annie said, after a while, it all works itself out because after a while, some kids say, I don't really need this chair. I prefer just to sit on the carpet anyway. And you find that equilibrium that includes equity. But for a little while, as teachers, we have to give up the control and the nice, calm, ordered, way. So anyway, we just have to let go and let the classroom find its way to including everybody. But at the beginning, it's a little. Do you have some thoughts first? And
Yeah, I do have a lot of thoughts. I actually been doing a lot of work. I'm currently writing a book. I'm co-authoring with somebody on universal design for learning in early childhood. And it comes from the Carolina Connections line of furniture I designed with Guidecraft and Kaplan. And we did a lot of research as to what children need. So one of the ways to think about it, we always think about the little square that they have to sit on because we think they need that space to define this is my space, and that way they don't touch each other. I got news for you. They're going to touch each other because they want to touch each other. So start thinking about, does it have to be a chair? Can we have different types of pillows and cushions and carpets? So create the variety before they come in so that they know, and give them a choice. And yeah, it may take a little bit more time away from the calendar, away from the weather. So maybe you rethink about the calendar and the weather. So one of the things to create equity is to think about group gatherings as a way to build community and not to teach a concept. It is not just about singing a song. It is about what do I need to do to create a sense of community with the group of children that I have here today. And if that means I have a basket with full of things they can hold, I have different possibilities for them to sit. They know what they need. They can bring them, make it available from the beginning. It may take a couple more minutes, but eventually they know. So anticipate all that from the beginning. I don't agree, and I'm going to be very clear about this, and this is research based, but it is my thinking. So it's kind of combination of opinion with research to back it up. I think children do not need to be labeled. And a lot of the times when we have the idea of inclusion, they come in with labels. You know, the chair that they bring, the walker that they bring, that becomes already an established label. The children see that. So the more we can do to create spaces where that label is a secondary motion and not the primary thing that children will focus about, and that means conversations that we have, the way we set up the environments, the furniture we pick and we select, you know, all of those little things. I'm sorry, timing, you know, how we handle our temporal schedules, all of those things are socio-emotional. Somebody was talking, getting the children to have conversations about this. All of those are essential from the very beginning. I see Anna with a hand up.
Hi. My thinking, I really appreciated the prompts this week. They were great, I thought. I just a little context. I was for 30 years in an Atelierista in a school that was pretty well established with the Reggio practice, and now I'm in a new setting and I'm working with a whole different population of teachers. So really what I was thinking about in terms of the environment and equity. And my struggle is how to respect the teachers' differences and where they're coming from. So most of them are coming from other childcare centers, and they're coming to this school, which is also a childcare center, but we're trying to recast it as sort of a Reggio. Teacher is, someone who puts up an alphabet chart, or like Miriam, someone who does the calendar, like you've been talking about the calendar. And so I'm trying to change a lot of those things, but then I have to do it with respect for these women who are, it makes them feel teacherly, posters they get from wherever, Lakeshore, whatever. So how to help. I understand very well how to make the environment equitable for the children, I think, because I've just been doing that for so long, but how to change adults' thinking without being insulting, too bossy. And so really to respect their points of view, but also work towards something different. So that's really what I've been thinking about with your prompts.
Miriam, you're on mute.
Anybody wants to?
Yeah, thanks for that, Anna. That's a good thought. And I'm also I was thinking about with the prompts and in this conversation about the environment, and the way that in its design, it can hold and support children in so many ways. And so in thinking about who's coming to the space and what their experience is with the space and sort of what they're reading when they walk in or when they're in the outside space, whether it's, what do I do here? Or I want to do everything at once, or I have no idea where to start or how I can engage with anything or anyone here. But the environment itself can hold that for children, whether it's clearly somebody who needs a lot of heavy work. And so the sand river is really a place for him, and the bicycles are a place for him to ride on the bike deck as long as he needs to. And it will interrupt as little as possible while he's doing that heavy work. and then to sort of make those, give a lot of choice in terms of when it is that we do need him to come inside and do something with fine motor or using, some language in a different way. But I think in seeing everyone's potential and everyone's needs in that respect, and then letting the physical space of the school sort of meet and the flexibility within that as well to decide, like, yeah, you have the choice to go and do that, and at some point I'm going to have you come and do something with me. Right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think you might want to have conversations surrounding like the image of the teacher too, as a whole, right? Like, what does that role look like to them? I don't know like your space in that or like the structure of your school, but I mean it is like a really great one to have again during prep week. Right, me and my prep weeks. And I know not every school has those, but just philosophically getting an understanding, because if someone views the image of the teacher as the holder of all knowledge and that they will then fill all these children because they're empty vessels and empty cups and this is their job and their duty, it's going to be quite challenging, to help make those shifts. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of conversation. And from experience, like outside resources help, right? Like different articles that people have. So it's not just like, oh, these are Anna's ideas, right? Like it's, oh, these are ideas from thought leaders like Miriam or from like Suzanne Axelson. She writes like amazing. She has amazing work. Um, but just bringing out other people too and like how they navigate their work with young children helps so that yeah, it doesn't become like contentious, right? And you
Right,
can
but
even like, oh, I read this article and I thought of you. Like I thought you'd find it really interesting. And you tie it into something positive, but at the same
yeah.
time you're providing a resource to help them grow.
But there's some nuance there about, I mean, of course, those are the things that you do, but the idea that within an equitable community,
Hmm.
I respect their point of view too, right? So then if I'm just tearing it all down all the time, even with articles or even with outside research, like some of it, where's the place where I can say, yes, this calendar session was cool because, for instance, I could say this calendar session was cool because you let the child go and look out the window and come back and say what they thought rather than telling them, right? So it's these little tiny bits that I have to pull out, like where I think they're doing a great job,
And
where I
yeah,
think they're
keeping it
getting
rooted
it.
in the children, like what's best for the children and what needs are being met for the children is what would be the guiding light, right? Like that's your guidepost.
Mhm.
Because then you're
Let
not.
me push back a little bit, and I do see you, Annie. I'll come back to you in a second. I'm going to push back. This is where Jesse calls me. What did you call me? The hurricane or the tornado or something like that? A force to some.
Ah, yes, I think
Um,
your force of nature.
yes, because
Like a
I am going to question something, and I want you to think about it. You don't need to give me an answer. I want you to reflect on this. Equity doesn't mean we don't push back. And I want you to hear how we talk about respecting the teacher's perspectives without understanding that the teacher perspective may not be respecting the child. I want you to think about that for a moment because
That's
this,
exactly the rock and the hard place that I'm between. So then how
well,
do I reach in, right?
with courage, with pushback. They may not like you in the beginning, and that's a difficult place to sit in. But if you think yourself as your values as an educator, do you have the responsibility? And I'm not mean you, I mean you, me, all of you.
Yeah.
Do we have the responsibility to push back against practices that we know are not equitable even if they come back to us and they say, you're not respecting my perspective. Questioning, arguments, conversations doesn't mean you're not being equitable. On the contrary, when you open for discussions and conversations, you're creating the brave spaces that allow for equity to emerge.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you're not respecting their perspective.
Yes.
It means you're asking questions to better understand their perspective and where
And
they're coming from and what the root of that is.
And going back to how is this supporting the equity for children? You know, always bring it back. I
Children.
think we have shined away so far from having those difficult conversations because they make us uncomfortable. Because, oh my gosh, I'm not respecting the teachers. Well, I got news for you. If they're not doing what is good for children, and we all know what that means, then we need to question it. You know, is the calendar the best thing? We can present the research. At the end of the day, you see it in their faces. So, Anna, I know I'm not giving you specific strategies, but I think inviting them to that kind of conversation is the best approach to all of this. And to know that I'm going to push you, I'm going to throw you into this equilibrium, but I'm going to provide with a safety net under you so that you have a place to come back and talk and discuss it. That doesn't mean that certain practices are equitable, even if we believe they are. Does that make sense? Annie, I come to you.
Can I share a couple things with Anna real quick too after you, Annie? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about like how the emphasis should be on um making meaning and allowing the children to make meaning and however that looks for them, right? And I mean, Anna, I'm like really familiar with your work. I used to read your blog all the time. And I feel like you know that as well as anyone, right? But I don't know. I was also thinking about kind of about the 100 languages and like we were talking about in one of our Zooms about giving like teachers opportunities to play with materials, setting up ateliers for teachers, um, and like kind of modeling that for them in a way that, they would be setting up their own classrooms. I don't know. I just kept coming back to this idea of like that helping them see that the emphasis needs to be on making meaning. And that happens through that deep questioning and revisiting and reflecting, and also through spaces that are designed in an intentional way. I don't know, but I hear you because like we've had challenges at my school with um kind of helping teachers understand that. And I feel like we're in a really good place now. But it's hard, especially like when educators are coming from environments that are very traditional.
Yeah.
So something that, I mean, take this or leave it, right? But something that has been helpful with different people that I've worked with different colleagues, is when we know we have to have one of those kind of conversations that can feel sticky, like role playing it with each other before we have the conversation with that person too. And like kind of thinking through if you don't have someone you can practice with, because it sounds like you may be a little island, um, like getting to know them and thinking through what their reactions might be so you can kind of already have it anticipated. And writing out, I'm someone who likes to write out. I know not everybody likes to write. Some people like to talk and think things through. I like to write out like, okay, if they say this, these are some points I might make, or like if it goes this way, this is what I might do. So like already thinking about all the possibilities before I even give them that article that am like, oh, I thought of you, right? And like thinking of how I'm framing this as a positive, how I'm going to connect with them, and like where are the ways it could go sideways, and how can I keep it rooted in the positive for the children, right? Like finding just strategies like that and always staying centered on like what's best for the children. helped, but really like the role play, I can tell you, I've got some colleagues that are very good at imitating others. And it was very helpful.
I like that
And you
idea,
can always,
Jess.
you can call us or send us an email, and one of us will role play with you for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Hold
I'm
on.
happy to do it too.
You know, Emma, I don't know. Did you read Matt's most recent post about the retreat that he put up this week? It reminds me of this a lot. And I'm in a different position, but I'm also in a new environment, and I'm coming in where things are tender. And so there's a lot of there's all the emotions, right? And so I think one thing I left the weekend with after reading that and kind of like grounding myself again after kind of a frustrating week was like that solidarity and like leading from a place of what Annie was saying of like people don't know what they don't know, maybe, and you know that. Like we all know that. But also I think engaging in like a spirit of like one version of compassion, but also like play and like learning how to bring that into those beginning spaces alongside those harder conversations that might need to happen can tend to that relationship and maybe using those external resources and being like, oh, we're going to do this today, or "Oh, we're going to try this today, or have you seen this today?" And kind of finding that balance of like, here's what I'm saying to do versus like, here's what I'm inviting us to do. And it certainly isn't easy. I really empathize with you. I'm not in the classroom right now, but the feeling is quite mutual. And so just trying to like navigate through that is always worth talking about.
Right. But don't give up. Anna, the
No.
other thing too is like that one thing that I posted that you said was really helpful to read. Use those with your group, because sometimes coming in with a question rather than telling them helps them reflect. I mean, I keep talking about the calendar. You can make it whatever you want it to be, but something as simple as what does the calendar mean for? Take this lens, take this lens, take this lens, take this lens. It really helps them begin to see that the calendar may not be necessarily something that accomplishes what they want to accomplish through the calendar. I wrote this book, and I'm not advertising, but I am, I guess. It's called Just Play, and it has play challenges throughout the book. And this was designed for staff, for parents, for adults. So that's another thing you can do is start every meeting with a play challenge that really helps people begin to think about things in a very different way. Like I think Yosani said, people don't know what they don't know. So our role, more than agreeing with them, I think is helping them see what they don't know and guiding them to find the research that can help them change their thinking. And if you can take that approach, I think he'll take you further than trying to convince them. Because I've been at it for 35 years. And if I convince 25 people in those 35 years, I've done a tremendous job, you know? Um, so that is just something to think about.
Well, and rather than viewing it as convincing, like view it as like a continuum of growth, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe they stop doing calendar, but they may still be doing a lot of the cookie cutter art, right? So take the win in the okay, there was growth, like their meeting time, their circle time is moving to more reflection. Now let's tackle our next step, right? Of getting the art to be more of process and seeing it as a long-term journey. Because it is a commitment to professional development and you know, at least here in California, you have your Title V schools, you have your Title 22s, and your Title 22s, as long as you have those 12 units, you don't have to do anything else. You're good. You're considered a fully
A
qualified
new
teacher. So
teacher.
people may not have more desire to further that. So it really can be a challenge in and of itself in that way. So, pushing them to want to continue to grow and seeing it as, okay, this person may only have 12 units, and they haven't done any professional growth in the 20 years that they've been teaching with these 12 units. So how do I help support them to grow just a little bit and view it as like small change is
Mhm.
powerful because it's still change and most people don't like change. I think they say only 10% of people actually accept change right in and of itself, and 60% are more like, well, let's wait and see. And then the other percentage are like, yeah, I'm never doing that.
Yeah.
Not
And
happening.
you're not going to change them. So do you want to continue to put so much energy into that?
Just
You know?
viewing it as opportunities for growth,
Yeah.
right?
I also, as Jesse was talking, I keep thinking about the issue of equity around social media, Pinterest,
Mhm.
how we're competing against that. In the past, oh my gosh, we see posts and I cringe every time I see them. And you're not going to be louder than what's happening in social media. So if they're getting bombarded with all these great Pinterest ideas, what are you going to do? You can spend as much time as you want talking with them as, oh, but I saw this in Pinterest. One of the things I did with one group that kept coming to me with Pinterest, I said, I tell you what, I'll give you $10 every time you think something through without Pinterest, and you put $10 every time you open the Pinterest. And that sort of brought them to an understanding of what was happening. I mean, I'm not saying put money, don't do $10, but do something that can be visible. This is a Pinterest jar and this is a non-Pinterest jar. Let's see which one fills faster. It's a little bit of behaviorism, which I'm not in favor of. But sometimes, what strategies can you use? Going back to agreements. How do we define equity? And how is a calendar equitable? When we have, I mean, I'm from Mexico. I can tell you, calendar means nothing to us other than the one we get by the beer company that we put in the home and the kitchen. I'm really being serious about this. Or the rhythms, systems of rhythms that children from other cultures bring forward. That the day-to-day calendar, that's more of a perception in this country than it may be in other countries. So you can begin to also bring that idea. And I'm going back to the calendar, ignore the calendar, but you know what I mean. It applies to anything. It's the same with how do we perceive the child that needs the fidget versus the one that doesn't need the fidget? How are the practices that we're incorporating in the classroom and the policies that we're bringing forward really supporting? I think policies are one of those things that we really need to question a lot, and it takes a lot of work to do that because they become institutionalized and we don't go back and shift them even though changes happen. Agreements need to be a living document. That's what really brings equity. uh Anyways, I have some comments. The why behind things. Are you doing something just because that's the way you always done it, because it's cute, or because it supports deeper learning? One thinking routine I'm considering using during our opening days and some changes in is compass points, a routine for examining propositions. I haven't used it before, but it seems like a possible helpful tool. I'm not familiar with the tool. Anna, so if you want to share, I have used our shared desire of wanting what is best for the children to bridge our differences. I like the idea of approaching it as a team through play and messing about with ideas and materials bit by bit. So do you want to share the compass tool? I'm not familiar with it.
Sarah, go ahead. I'll find the link while I hear.
Okay. I was just thinking, and at that, the last job that I was actually a director in the center, because I'm part of a team that runs 7 centers right now. But I worked to move them towards a Reggio-inspired philosophy and ran into a lot of kind of the difficulties that you have been expressing about changing their practices that were much more about the children's growth and benefit and not about the teacher, meaning the calendar artwork that really was the teacher's artwork on the wall as opposed to children's artwork on the wall. And through those very long periods of conversation, there was occasionally when we came to, I always came from a place of acknowledgement and respect of saying, I understand kind of where this is coming from, which helped to open the door towards us having further conversations because there was always acknowledgement and respect. And that made a huge difference with keeping the conversation flowing when we were trying to move forward. And I will say through time and practice, we got to a place where the children were always central to the conversation. Most of the time, we were not perfect ever, but I heard somebody the other day in another meeting I was in who they bring a small chair to every meeting and put it in the middle of the meeting to remind us that this is what this whole meeting is about, these small children who sit in this chair, so that we remember and keep them central to the focus, which I was like, that's a very powerful image to keep in mind. And that's, it goes back to my comment of we are all here for what's best for the children. And we have that in common, no matter where we're coming from and what our backgrounds are, level of training, all of those things. That's the bridge for our differences.
That's a powerful image. I'm going to share the actual, let me see, where did it go? The Project Zero. Oh, I had it somewhere. Oh, here it is. Nope. Oh, here it is. This is the compass. And anything that comes from Project Zero, I have full trust.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a powerful tool that can be used, and you can redefine it and create it for yourselves. Any type of reflection is a good reflection to help people think about it. That means for equity reasons, shift your meetings to be reflective meetings instead of this is what we're going to do. Right now that they're coming back, ahead of time, send them before you start setting up your environments. Walk in the classroom, stay by the door, notice and observe. Go on your knees or sit in a low chair if you cannot go on your knees, and look at what children see when they first come in. Then one of the questions I like to ask, who stays at the threshold because they cannot come in? Who's left behind at the threshold? The child that I was one of them. I had tremendous anxiety going into the preschool program when I was growing up because I didn't like it and the children were mean and I just didn't feel safe. I cried, and unless my mom sat outside and I could watch her, I would not stay. And then she would sneak away and I would start crying and leave the room. So who stays at the threshold because they can cross it for whatever reason without judgment, understanding that? I think that gives us as teachers a really good angle to look at our physical spaces in a different way. So just a thought. Oh, this is another big question. This is bringing up parental buy-in in education. How do we bring up when adults who may need more exposure to ideas, maybe the ones who are not or cannot volunteer or attend parent meetings? Yeah, that's a hard one. That's again an issue of equity. How are you disseminating information to every family so that they get and know? What modes are you doing? I know that I get my granddaughter's Bright, whatever they call that app. I love looking at the picture. She's moving to another program where they're not doing that because their concept of equity, I'm not going to be taking photos of children. I'm going to be present with the children. But that needs to be explained to the parents. For me, it's like, I'm going to be losing my daily photos. I understand both sides, Not really. I understand more the side of the new program she's going to. But how do we communicate in multiple ways that the families can actually hear it and not just one language? So that's something to think about. Okay, here's an equity and equality. I'm going to throw a wrench on this one. May I? Please? Can you see it? Let me share it. Have you seen that one? Have everybody seen this? To me, equity is not having the fence.
There is an image, I'd have to find it. There's an image like that
Mhm.
where it's like completely gone, like somebody tacked on additionals to that. I'll have to look and see if I can find it.
There's a
Yeah.
lot more that goes to it, but it was
Yeah,
my first
yeah.
imagery
No.
that ever came up that even began to make me think about equity
Yeah.
and equality as different.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then they also have more imagery that goes on. But it's just, to me, it's the challenge, the beginning of challenging your thought process on understanding the difference and to go deeper. And as you say, Miriam, let's dig deeper and ask deeper questions about those things.
So one of the things, Sarah, to do with this image is I show it as a first step. And then I said, is there any way for us to move equity further? What other solutions would you have? And they come up with, maybe have ladders, whatever it is. And then at the end, you say, how about if we remove the fence? And that takes it to that. So this to me is a conversation started, but how do you get to the next one? The other thing that I did a lot when I was teaching, have anybody ever read the book, Why Are All the Black Children Sitting on the Other Side of the Cafeteria? There's a specific vignette that she uses about the people mover. Have you seen that? So bottom line, and here goes the piece that we don't talk about. The issues of equity have more to do with privilege and oppression than we want to acknowledge. And in order for us to see that, we need to reflect on our own privilege. So a lot of the times, this idea of fairness comes from it's not fair if you're taking it away from me. So in this people mover exercise, what happens is people stay, and this is how I did it. This is not the way it's written in the book. I just took the idea of the people mover. I had one of my students come to the front with me, and I had everybody else on the other side. And I said to my student, I also told to my student ahead of time, I prepared them, and I knew the student that could handle it. And I said, you're going to be that white supremacist. And I'm not talking about the Nazi groups or anything like that. I'm just talking about an ideology. Whiteness is best. Okay. And I said, you're going to stand here with me. And I introduced her as that. And I said, everybody else, stay on the other side. And when I say something that it feels that you have done, step on the people mover. And I would ask questions like, I laughed at somebody that looked different than me. I laughed at the guy that was driving next to me because I knew he was Asian. I just throw everything that I can think about, from ableism to ageism, everything. And eventually everybody got in the people mover. And I said, now you have a choice. You're already in the people mover. Are you going to get off the people mover, or are you just going to stand in the people mover and wait for you to get to the white supremacy stance? And that was hard for a lot of my students. And it was hard for me to do every semester. But it was a real open way to have more conversations about the decisions are held by a small group. And we have an option. Either we get into the people mover or we don't. Because once we get, we will identify with what is happening at the end. I'm not necessarily offering you to do that right away, but it's something for you to think about and reflect on. Any thoughts or reflections? This is a hard conversation, folks.
Well, it makes me think of the line in the chapter of the Imagination Manifesto that she says our challenge is whether we can imagine a world which social acceptance does not depend on superiority, and you're fit, you belong, regardless of your fitness or your superiority. And I know last week we briefly touched upon some kids creating their belonging through othering others and hearing that superiority. Like, okay, the fastest runners are going to sit at this table today, and so how to talk about that with the kids is something I was thinking about in this reading, because it's happening with the 5-year-olds, establishing superiority and how to unpack that with them.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the image, the fact that the fence is there, there's still one person controlling that fence. When you remove the fence, you remove the barrier. And that's our goal in equity, removing the fence.
Nerling
Threshold.
added a new image that they updated that shows the fence gone at the end, which in my fast search I did not find right away. But
that one person who already can see over the fence might want to keep the fence, right? Because
it helps them.
It helps, they have an advantage.
I think the people inside of the fence want the fence to stay there.
Right. That's what it is, yeah.
Is this, okay, here it goes. I'm going to share it again. There it is. Do you see it? And when you remove the fence is when we get to justice. And that is a conversation that we need to be having. And it's harder today. In today's climate, it's a lot harder. When you have to edit everything that you hear and everything that you say. And let's be honest, this is political. And I'm not talking politicals from one group or the other, but education is political. Access to education is political. Access to justice is political. And that requires a different level of courage. You know, going back to the book on imagination, who can imagine an easier world? And the answer is easy. You know, people that have money have an easier time. People that have full abilities have an easier time. People who are white have an easier time. People who are younger have an easier time. I am disappearing, folks. I'm really getting to that point where I feel it very strongly, where I feel invisible just because of my age. So ageism, ableism, all of those have to do with equity and with justice. And, you know, go back to the anti-bias curriculum. Anti-bias, it's not a curriculum, it's an educational approach. Do we have the courage to bring those conversations further? Because we can talk about strategies, we can talk about ideas, but at the bottom is, where do you stand in your own space? Are you ready to defend it? Are you still on the fence? All valid. I'm not saying there's one way or another. We're just in a different place of the journey. And what do you need to do to get to the other side to eliminate the fence? And I think we're over time. I just look at the clock. I could talk about this forever and ever. Please use the questions. They're great reflective questions. We spent a lot of time thinking about them. And I'm excited to see you next week. Great conversation. I am going to try to edit. I have a hard time editing. I'll be very honest. So I'm going to try to edit and upload it by tomorrow or maybe Wednesday. Okay, I just need a couple of days.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Very much.
much, everyone. Take care.
So
Thank you.
helpful. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all. Bye.